Frankenstein is a 2025 American sci-fi horror film written and directed by Guillermo del Toro and stars Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, Christoph, Waltz, and Mia Goth. The story follows a brilliant but arrogant scientist convinced that he can do the impossible, which is defeat death itself, but of course, playing God comes at a cost. So I have a pretty complicated relationship with Guillermo del Toro. I'm such a fan, first off. I love the guy. I've loved his work for many years. I'm constantly taken by his passion for film, his friendly demeanor, and, we both share a love for the esoteric. I'm not a huge fan, and I've said this before, but I'm not a huge fan of Victorian-era films. Well, and I hate that about myself. But, those seem to be Del Toro's happy place, and I'll watch anything that he does, but the whole gothic, love tale thing has never really been for me as much as I wish that it was. So Del Toro had been wanting to direct a Frankenstein film for quite a while, as far as I can remember. It was like a bucket list thing for him, and he's talked about it in the past. It was actually originally supposed to be a part of the failed, Universal Dark Universe or whatever they called it, franchise thing with legendary and one of my favorite comic book artists, Bernie Wrightson, who sadly passed back in 2017. But his work, remained a key inspiration for the look of the film, the creature especially. Because if you take a look at Jacob, Elordi's version of the creature, he definitely resembles Bernie Wrightson's version, and there's no better artist to use here for inspiration. Just one of my favorites. And I should probably get this out of the way: the fact that I've never read the original Mary Shelley book. I just haven't yet. I know it's a story that means a whole lot to a whole lot of people, and one of those people actually is Guillermo del Toro himself. So I guess you could say my review is going to be fairly simple, though I did try to do some research and stuff. I know a lot of people are throwing, or have been throwing criticism, at this movie, because apparently it doesn't always follow the book, as close as they wanted it to, or maybe expected to, given, Del Toro's history with the source material and all that. I am a fan of the movies, though, and the character of the creature even more. One of my favorite monsters of all time. I love the original, gothic, sad version. I love the Munsters and Addams Family versions. I love it all. I think one of my main takeaways here was that I really do seem to enjoy the older, Frankenstein films, more than anything that I've seen from the last 5 decades or so. And this film included. As beautiful as it looks, and I mean beautiful because this is one of the best looking films I've seen in many years, just off the top of my head, since maybe at least like Prometheus. And I might even like the looks, the look of this even more. Just, I could go off. And I just remembered I did really like the HBO Penny Dreadful version of Frankenstein. I'll have to talk about that show sometime too. I've been wanting to. I just I don't really like talking about television series. So the film is in 3 parts and begins with the prelude, where a Danish ship gets stuck in the ice, and the crew finds an injured Victor Frankenstein out there, much to their surprise, I'm sure. And as soon as they bring him aboard, they're attacked by the creature, Frankenstein's monster, who smashes his way through the sailors. It's a pretty violent, gory scene, which was cool. It's also a CGI-heavy scene, but it's good CGI, and it's a night scene. This is also a $120 million film, so that should tell you a little bit about what you need to know. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that in the book, Victor is found, but they don't encounter the creature. I personally don't think we needed to see him within the first 3-4 minutes of the movie. It just seemed kind of like an excuse to include an action scene, but again, I don't know. Some of this stuff might be book accurate. It might be not, or it might not be. I'm just not sure. The rest of the film is split up into 2 parts: Victor's tale and the creature's tale. And you learn about, Victor's very traumatic childhood. He was raised by his abusive father after his mom died, giving birth to his younger brother, William, played by Felix Kemmerer. And as a young man, Victor becomes obsessed with cheating death, but his arrogance gets him kicked out of medical school. And I found it a little weird that the powers that be, weren't super impressed by the fact that he can bring corpses back to life. But I digress. And just as it seems like his medical career was cut short, in comes Heinrich Harlander, a wealthy, I think it was like a weapons dealer or whatever, played by the always amazing Christoph Waltz. And Heinrich wants to fund Victor's ongoing experiments, and of course, Victor's naturally skeptical, but it's just too good of an opportunity to turn down. You're just throwing tons of money at him and stuff. Victor also, begins to fall for his brother William's fiancée Elizabeth, played by Mia Goth. Good brother, right? Played by Mia Goth, and you really start to realize that Victor is not necessarily a good dude. Smart, but completely lacking a moral compass, and by design. Whether you have read Shelley's novel or not, we have, like 100+ years of Frankenstein films. I think I've seen, maybe not all of them, I've seen most of them, though. Anyways, my point being, Victor has always been a very flawed character. That's the whole point of the story. Oscar Isaac does a great job at portraying a brilliant, self-obsessed asshole. I suppose you could kind of call him the villain of the story, but every villain has their chance at redemption. He's incredibly abusive towards the creature, when it doesn't learn as fast as he would like. Almost like he demands perfection from him, just like his dad did to him. So, I'm definitely feeling the generational trauma thing in the story, which is just one of the many, many layers here. And it would seem to be that Del Toro did kind of cherry pick from the book. And I don't mean that as an insult. Obviously you can only put so much in a 2.5-hour movie. I'm just not well versed enough to criticize, whether or not I think he followed the book closely enough. I'm just kind of going off what other people have said. But I guess at the end of the day, if you want a storyline, that follows the original story 100%, just read the book and you'll be fine. Also, being a fan of the 1935 Bride of Frankenstein, I like how Del Toro gave nods to that storyline here. That was really cool. In the book, the creature, doesn't want to spend eternity alone, so he demands Victor create a mate for him, which he does, I guess, but he destroys her out of fear that they might procreate. So here, Victor just flat out refuses to create another living creature because he regrets what he has done. He's now, scared of what the creature might be able to do. So here, our nod to the bride comes in the form of Elizabeth, Mia Goth's character. So, in the original 1818 novel, Elizabeth was Victor's cousin. Oops. different time, I guess. But Shelley came back in 1831 with a change of heart, addressing some criticism and a revised novel. So this version had Elizabeth as an orphan adopted by Victor's family, which is better, I think, when Victor was very young. And to be honest, I really don't know why she made these changes, or this change at least, but I'd say it was a smart move and probably helped the story age a lot better. But here, as I said, Elizabeth is William's fiance. I've always loved Mia Goth, and she represents compassion as Elizabeth, and she is like the first to see the creature as a person, as a man, instead of, the animal that Victor sees. And they just form an instant bond. And on that note, part 2, the creature's tale, is by far my favorite. And again, I've always loved the creature as a character, and I think I relate to him more now, or I always did and just didn't really realize it. I think my only problem with his story is that it felt kind of rushed. I kind of needed it to be longer. As far as to what I was missing, I'm not really sure. It just felt like he kind of had a lot to say in maybe too little time. His story starts exactly where Victor's ends, and it's a raw, sad story. One thing I never expected to say is that I was kind of blown away by Jacob Elordi's performance as the creature. Was I a little bit unsure of his look at first? And yes, and is Jacob Elordi probably a little bit too handsome? Maybe, but I think he was kind of great here. Del Toro needed an actor that could bring this version of the creature to life. This isn't a Boris Karloff film. So Elordi brings the proper emotion to, to his obviously very limited dialogue. I should probably mention too, and I just did not expect that. Another thing I noticed, you know, pretty quickly was the way that he moved. Like almost animal-like, as you may expect from someone with, very limited human contact. And he gets better and more confident with time. You see how he learns to talk and, how he wants to be part of a family. That's just what he wants the most. And he wants a companion, someone like him, someone that wouldn't reject him. And I really do think I would have enjoyed this movie more if the creature story was just a little bit longer and Victor's was maybe a little bit shorter, or just longer on the creature's end. I think this needed to be a 3-hour movie. Victor's story was good, and Oscar Isaac, reminds us that he can take any role, and excel at it pretty much no matter what. I always saw Victor Frankenstein as the villain in his own story. And Oscar Isaac, brings out Victor's detestable side as good as anyone could have. I think my main complaint, maybe with the entire film, was, Victor's redemption arc. Because it didn't really work for me. It just kind of felt too little, too late. And, it just wasn't effective for me at all. Again, if this was like a 3+ hour movie, I think it probably would have worked better for me. But I'm not sure. That aside, I think that this is a very good Frankenstein film. I watched it twice and I liked it quite a bit more on the second watch. I wouldn't call it my favorite, Frankenstein story, but it is my favorite depiction of the creature on an emotional level. And I have to read the book now. And this is the movie that made me realize that the creature represents all of us. There are just so many parallels people can draw, and, that's why he's so loved by fans. So I'm giving Frankenstein 3 out of 4 stars. If you feel left behind or unloved, misunderstood or disenfranchised, Mary Shelley understands you. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex. Subscribe right now, please.